What does it really mean to be complete, to be done, to be finished? And honestly, as a business owner, are you ever done? What if you let go of the oars and just let yourself float merrily down the stream? That's what we're going to be exploring this week. The essence of what it takes to be complete and how we can weave in those moments where maybe we just let the boat flow and see what happens. I'll see you in this week's episode of Weekly Momentum. Welcome to this week's episode, inspired by my husband and a conversation that we had in the car, which I'll tell you all about in a moment. We've got some fun experiments I'm going to share with you today, as well as some strategies and ideas, as always, so that you can start to tap into your natural momentum. As a business owner, it often feels like a challenge, like you're walking a tightrope as you are managing time off and work, and often a mix of the two. It can get really blurry in terms of what is time off and when are you even done with work. We're going to explore that a little deeper in this week's episode of Weekly Momentum. But first, if you're new, welcome. Weekly Momentum is an opportunity for you to learn tips, ideas, strategies, not hacks, but more habits that are going to help you create more momentum in your business and in your personal life. If you are a busy business owner and you are looking to spend more time working on your business and less time in the day-to-day grind, then you're going to find lots of great ideas in this week's episode. And I definitely recommend that you subscribe so that you keep getting in momentum every single week. We have a new episode that drops every single Sunday. All right, so this week's episode was inspired by a conversation with my husband and a conversation in my head. Let me share that story with you. This last week, I was planning on going away for the week to spend time with my husband's family for the holidays. The week before, I wanted to get all of my ducks in line so that I was ready to take time off. And as is often the case for, I'm sure you too, the week before did not go as planned. Somehow a root canal got into the equation and an event I was going to for a client. And so suddenly the entire week was pretty much gone. And so I soothed myself by letting myself know that I was going to use Monday. We were going to leave on Tuesday. On Monday, I would have a super productive day. And then Monday rolled around and I just didn't feel like doing anything. If you've been listening for a while, you know that if I am not feeling like doing something, I'm not going to push myself into action. I'm a firm believer in things can get done, and I can be the Get It Done Diva, but not by rushing and pushing and hustle. And so when I don't feel like doing something, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my tools. I'm going to get myself in the mood. I'm going to do a little bit of productivity foreplay. And so I grabbed my 30-day planner. I grabbed some paper. I played around. I mind mapped. I did some journaling. I sat outside in the sunshine and looked at my watch. And now it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I still didn't feel like doing anything. And I wanted to shoot some videos. I wanted to get some emails set up. I wanted to work on my website a little. There was quite a few things that I wanted to do. And I just was not feeling it. And by the time 2 o'clock rolled around, I realized that nothing was going to happen. And I gave myself permission that it was okay, that those things would get done when I got back. And I released a lot of pressure that I had been feeling, a lot of peer pressure around doing a special around the Black Friday, that whole buzz. I wasn't feeling it. So I appeased myself. I said, it's okay, and soothed myself and went and watched a show with my husband that evening and packed my case. And the whole day, all I'd been thinking that I wanted to really do was clean the house and tidy up and purge and enjoy appreciating what I had and getting ready to go away for the week and enjoying some time in my home before I left. That's what I'd really wanted to do that day. And I had, for the most part, done that by sitting outside. If I'd have really allowed myself, I would have tinkered around in the house. I would have enjoyed picking up, putting some things away, and really being in my home a little bit more. But I was in that gray area where I spent most of the day feeling guilty and frustrated that I wasn't in the mood to do the work stuff. So I went to bed Monday, got up Tuesday morning. We left real early in the morning, about 8:30 in the morning. And we're driving. It's about a 5, 6 hour drive. And so we're about 2 or 3 hours into the drive. And I start telling my husband what I just told you. So, yeah, Monday I was going to do the videos and then I didn't. He goes, yeah. Yeah, so, Monday was like a complete waste of a day. And I sat there with my mouth open. It's like he'd gone inside my head and 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 pulled the words right out and then spat them out of his mouth. And I looked at him. I'm like, thanks so much. Thank you so much. I feel so much better now that you've said that to me. And then he cracks up laughing. He's like, it's okay if you take a day off or two. You don't have to do something every day. And we both laughed. But it was that moment right before the laughter when there was the pause, and I really thought he was being serious. And I felt what it felt like to be me listening to that voice in my head telling me, you're wasting time, you're wasting the day. And it brought me back to this idea of feeling complete. So often as business owners, we are in this place where we never feel complete. There's always something. A great example of that is when I was visiting my mom in England recently. Quite often, almost every day, she'd say to me, are you done with your work now? And I would just look at her and I'm thinking to myself, there is no end. It reminds me of a commercial that I absolutely love. I couldn't tell you what it's for, but there was a commercial, and basically this woman was on the computer and she was on the computer and she was on the computer. And then she put the computer lid down. She walked into the other room and she looked at her spouse and she said, okay, I'm done. He said, what do you mean? She goes, I got to the end of the internet, right? And that's what it feels like being a business owner, right? There is no end to the internet. There is no end to what we can do as business owners when we have our own business or if we're professionals, because we're always thinking of ideas of people that we could follow up with or reach out to, or how we can deliver to our customers or clients even more value, how we can maybe update our website or make new business cards, right? Return voicemails. It's like never ending what we can do for our business. So there is no clear, are you complete? And that's what I started thinking about after the laughter in the car. And so I was chewing on that because I feel like I've really carved a strong neural pathway in my brain around the idea that I am never done, that there is no end. There is no end to it. And I realized that even if that is true, and even if you were nodding your head as you were listening to me saying that just now, that does not serve us to buy into that belief. If I find a belief that I think, what if I could vaporize that belief and then live without that belief being something that I'm building what I'm doing around? Because beliefs really shape our habits, our behaviors, but even more importantly, our beliefs shape how we feel. And I know that when I buy into the belief that I am never done, that there is no end to my work and there never ever will be, there is no way that that ever feels like a good thought to feel. I do love the creativity of it, but mostly what it feels like is there's no sense of completion. And we as human beings, business owners or not, love to feel a sense of completion. It's one of the reasons why in my 30-day daily momentum planner, which I absolutely love. It's based on my book, Daily Momentum, and you can buy both of them over at my website, getitdonediva.com, or I'll pop the link in the description below. But in my Daily Momentum Planner, there's a little check-in that you can do at the end of each day. And one of the things you're checking in with is your sense of accomplishment. You grade it on a score of 1 through 5, how much you feel like you accomplished. Accomplishment to me is finishing things. And especially as business owners, I feel like we don't get that feeling often enough because the projects that we're focused on are usually quite large and we don't tend to break them down. One of the things that I do when I'm coaching clients around this is really let's look at celebrating some of those smaller wins and daily accomplishments so that you can satiate that human desire that you need to feel a sense of accomplishment. So I already know, like, we need to feel this sense of accomplishment. So why am I frying my circuitry by telling myself that there is no end, that I am never done? And I was chewing on that several days while I was away with my husband's family. And I started thinking, well, what is the antidote to this limiting belief? What can I think differently? And honestly, the strongest thing that came to me is the pure, simple statement, I am complete. Now, if I say that without really needing it to be about something in particular, try it with me right now. I am complete. Just saying those 3 words feels soothing. Just saying the words. Now, if I'm already in a very negative place when I say those 3 words, my brain's going to go off and my itty bitty shitty committee is going to be saying bullshit. My bullshit meter will be going off, right? But if I'm in a pretty good place, not frustrated or angry or overwhelmed, if I'm just kind of in that sweet spot and I say to myself, take a breath, and I say, I am complete, that feels really good. And I started playing and experimenting with that a little bit. What if I were to just start saying that now and again? In last week's episode, I talked about equal airtime, right? For that negative voice in your head as well as the positive voice in your head. And so this is a really great example of the negative voice saying, oh, there is no end, I'm never done. And the positive voice just having equal airtime, simply saying about nothing in particular, I am complete. Right now, I am complete. And it just felt like something that I wanted to plant and I wanted to allow to grow so that it could maybe crowd out the noise of there is no end, I'm never done. And as we're talking about feeling complete, I start to begin to look at how much is enough. How do you even know you've done enough? In an earlier episode of Weekly Momentum, we talked about the idea of taking score. I just introduced that in the Daily Momentum 30-day planner that I have, you can take score each day. I like to gamify things so that we can feel that sense of accomplishment, of completeness. And on a weekly level, the reason behind the weekly top 10 that we use, coming up with 10 things that you're going to do each week, and then just checking in and giving yourself a score out of 10, how many did you complete at the end of the week, is a way to gamify and feel that sense of accomplishment so that you can start to not only tell yourself, I am complete, but you can see how much you're accomplishing. But that only works if you set the clear weekly top 10 at the beginning of the week. I love the expression, it's impossible to hit a moving target. And how that relates to what we're talking about here is that if you don't create a weekly to-do list, a weekly top 10, then at the end of the week you feel like you didn't do anything, you've got no argument to counter that voice in your head saying you wasted the week. But if you wrote down a list of things that were your weekly top 10, and here's the caveat, if you look at it throughout the week, then you have clear evidence, and a lot of the time you'll realize you've accomplished a lot more than you thought you had. Because every single time I do a weekly review, a monthly review, or an annual review with any client, they are shocked by how much they accomplished. Most of the time, you're maybe accomplishing things that aren't even on the list, but you still get to take credit for that. We have wins all around us, and definitely tuning into that helps us feel more of a sense of accomplishment. If you don't resonate with the idea or understand what limiting beliefs are, think of it like creating a hamster wheel for yourself that you don't want to be on. It's not like a really fun roller coaster ride. It's a hamster wheel of repeating the same thing again and again. And when we have certain things that we tell ourselves, like my idea of telling myself in my head, or even out loud sometimes, there is no end to the work. I'm never done. You're creating this mental hamster wheel for yourself. So when you find a counter to that, when you find something else that you can say when you're prompted to have the desire to say that, or even after you've said it, you're giving yourself a little escape hatch from that hamster wheel. You're giving yourself an alternative so that you don't have to keep spinning on the hamster wheel. So back to my week away, I'm chewing on the idea of what is this antidote. I come up with the I am complete. I've got a long way to go to make it a habit, but I started at least leaning into that could be an alternate choice of what I could be saying in my head and feeling into the I am complete. I had decided that while I was away, well, what I'll do is even though I didn't do all the stuff I wanted to on Monday, I thought to myself, well, I can get everything ready so that when I get back on Saturday, on Sunday, I'll be ready to go to shoot my videos. I felt this obligation within myself to squeeze some things in and let's just do that web page, or let me just get that email out, or let me just write the script for that video. And at the beginning of the day, wanting to create a little to-do list with those types of items on. But it didn't feel right to even write the list. So I was catching myself before I was doing it. And so I started leaning into the idea, this is from Abraham Hicks, any of you that are followers of Abraham Hicks, the idea of letting go of the oars. What would happen if I just let go of the oars? And it was interesting because I still was feeling the pressure of let's do a Black Friday sale. Everybody else is doing one. Why not leverage this time and take advantage of it? And I really wasn't feeling it. And so it felt so good, the idea of just, what if I just let go of the oars? And so instead of pushing, squeezing something out, giving myself stuff to do to squeeze into the day in between having fun and hanging out with my in-laws, I decided I'm just going to drop the oars. And what happened is sales just came in anyway. I didn't need to have a sale. In fact, I probably did better than I would have if I would have had a sale, because I allowed myself to just let go, to just allow things to come to me instead of needing to orchestrate how it was going to come to me. It was like stepping stones of different thoughts and ideas that happened, and I evolved from one thought to the next as I moved through the week away. So it started with this sense of I'm never done. Then we moved into I am complete. And then this idea of letting go of the oars and just allowing. So now let's see if we can take some of these ideas and let's weave them into the weekly momentum process. And if you're new to weekly momentum, the weekly momentum process is a way for you to strategically plan your week as a professional so that you can make sure that you do have that sense of accomplishment and you create momentum. And it has 4 different steps to it. And if you want to learn more about the weekly momentum planning process, I do a deep dive training, which you can grab for free. The link's down below in the description. It's called Weekly Planning for Busy Professionals. There's videos, there's worksheets. I'll take you through all 4 steps of the weekly momentum process. Today, I just want to give you a little taste of how you could take the ideas that we've just talked about today and weave them into your weekly momentum planning process. So let's start with step 1. Step 1 is the rewind. So in step 1, as we're rewinding the week and you're going through the regular questions that we have for the weekly evolution, I want you to also think about, as you look at last week, what felt complete? Let's start to solidify a description. I love defining words for myself. I feel like I take the power of the words fully when I do that. And one of the best ways to do that is to do it by looking at your past experience. So, what I want you to do is, I want you to look at the last week and I want you to notice, what did you complete? What felt like complete? How would you define complete? What does it even mean to you? And as you find examples of moments and small tasks and little wins that you felt like were a sense of complete last week, notice how that makes you feel. If you're struggling to find anything, then look at your calendar. Rewind in your mind, like play the movie of the last week. I know that there's things that you completed, and don't just make it about business. This is your entire life. It could be that you felt complete because you filed taxes, or you felt complete because you put away the dishes, right? That there are small and large things that can give us a sense of completion. And I want you to tune into what that feels like so that then you can invite more of that sense of completion into the next week. Yes, we can stand in, I am complete already. Absolutely. But what if we blend that also with a better understanding of what complete means? So in step 1, rewind, you're really just chewing on this idea of, what does it mean to be complete? And what did that look like for me last week? Next up is realign. And so as you look at your bigger goals, it might be that you set annual goals. Maybe you follow my momentum method and you have a 90-day plan. Look at those bigger goals now, because as I said a few minutes ago, it's impossible to hit a moving target. If you don't set these bigger goals, then you're never going to feel a sense of a completion or accomplishment. And so every week, if you take a moment to just look at the bigger picture, what are those things that you're working towards? And once again, acknowledge, what milestones? How have you moved towards them? Because each step towards building the new website is a sense of completion for you. It might be that you've designed the colors, you've decided what colors you want to use on your website. That could feel like a sense of a completion if you had set it as a milestone. And so I want you to get into the habit of looking at the bigger goals, but then breaking them into smaller bites so that you can feel the sense of accomplishment as you figure out the colors for the website, or create your homepage, or write your bio. Looking at how you're going to do your navigation, right? Taking a big project and breaking it into bites. So as you look at your 90-day or annual goals, what have you done to move towards them? And I love in the 90-day planner, there's actually, to the right of each of the projects on the plan, there are little bubbles. There's 10 of them, so that you can color in how much percentage you're complete with each of the projects, because it's not just about getting to 100%. You want to celebrate 10% completion, 50% completion, 60% completion. You can celebrate all of those milestones. And one of the things that it's good to do too is when you have something like that, where you are working on a project and you are going to celebrate how complete you are in a percentage, you can play the game with yourself of going, okay, what would 10% look like ahead of time? You can look at what would 50% complete look like. Would it mean that I would have all of the slides and the script written for my new video? Would that be 50%? Would 70% mean that I've shot it? And would 80% be that I've done my first edit or had it edited, right? Really think about, if you have a big project, how you could break it down and what each percentage out of 100 would look like, because then you get to celebrate that sense of completion. And you can say to yourself when you color in 50% complete, I am complete. I am complete with that step. We can say that and celebrate it and see it in black and white that it's actually happening. So we've done rewind, we've done realigned. Now, as we step into step 3, which is planning your week, this is where that fun game of your weekly top 10 comes into play. So as you're putting together your weekly top 10, more than any other week, I want you to think about what would complete look like. I think a lot of times we write down things that are so broad and general that could be completed in several different ways that we don't really give ourselves that sense of accomplishment because we weren't clear on what the rules of the game were to start with. So as you're writing down items on your weekly top 10 for this upcoming week, really think about it. And a great way to do this is to think about it as if you were giving someone else that task that you were paying. If you hired someone to do that task for you, you would be very clear about how you would know they were done, because then they would be paid for what they had done, or you'd be able to know that they weren't on track for what they were supposed to be doing. So write your weekly top 10 this week as if you were writing it for someone else, really clear and specific, so there's no doubt at all about the agreement that you're making with yourself on your weekly top 10. And that's going to then allow you, as you look at it each day and you plan your day, what you'll do is you create a winnable game for yourself if you design your weekly top 10 like that this week. Finally, step 4, plug in. This is where you make the space in your calendar and in your mental state so that you can actually accomplish the things that you're writing down. It's one thing to write down a to-do list, but if you don't create the space for it to get it done, if you're not clear how to get started on it, if you're not really believing that you're going to get it done, if you're not making a commitment, then it's probably not going to get accomplished. So as you look at your weekly top 10, which you've maybe been more specific as I recommended with, now look at your calendar. When are you going to do these things? Break it into bites. You're going to time block when you're going to do these things. And just because you block it off on the calendar, for me, it's not necessarily about I'm going to do it at exactly that time that I put it on the calendar. Putting it on the calendar and plugging it in allows you to see how much space you have. For me, it's a reality check, because sometimes I might then go back after I look at the calendar and it's way too full, and I might adjust the weekly top 10 so that there's not so much to do this week. I might make some adjustments to some of the other things that are already on the calendar if I see how busy the week is. This is a really great way for you to manage your time before you're in the middle of the week. So make sure that every week you do step 4, not just the step 3 of planning the week, but also of plugging it in so that you're ready to go. So this week we've explored this idea of what does complete even mean. We've set up the weekly top 10 so that you've got a better chance of actually feeling that sense of completion. I gave you a strategy of how to escape the mental hamster wheel and instead stand in the statement of I am complete, and start to give equal airtime to that statement. If you do also share my habit of feeling like you're never done. And I encourage you this week to also notice if you do have other things that you are saying that are limiting you, that are in your thinking, and maybe come up with your own antidotes so that you can find statements that you can say as you're giving yourself equal airtime for both sides of the equation in your head. If you want to create change, if you want to break out of some of this thinking that is holding you back, or some of the habits that are maybe getting in the way of you working on some of those bigger projects that you'd like to work on in the next year, then you'll find the link in the description below for your breakthrough year. It's an opportunity for you to get all the tools you need to break out of old habits and design a year where you can spend less time in the day-to-day grind and more time working on those projects that light you up. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you in next week's episode of Weekly Momentum. Much love.